Okay, guys, so we're going to start the 1920s and the Great Depression. I'm going to do one chunk of the 20s, and then we'll do a second of the Great Depression. Okay, so after World War One, the world is in a okay spot. Some places are suffering. Can you guess who? Oh, yeah, the Germans. And then some places are soaring. Okay, so let's talk about the soaring places. Okay, now, so if you had a capitalist nation, it's going to go through a little bit of a recession right after the war, okay? But there's a real quick recovery, okay? So if you look at the little chart I got for you right here, this is what happens with capitalism. You get boom and bust and boom and bust, okay? It is going to recover. Sometimes it takes longer, normally about 10 years. And then you can see how the peaks don't seem to last as long as the troughs. Interesting, eh? But remember, capitalism can bring a ton of economic growth. It brings the most, but it also brings poverty with it. It's just what comes, all right? All right, so let's talk about the 20s, all right? Especially focusing on the United States, okay? So you got some cool things going, like people are happy, they want to be isolated. Remember, we did not sign the Treaty of Versailles, okay? We did not join that League of Nations. We're like, we got this, yo. Of course, popular culture is going to emerge. And then we'll talk about the traditionalism versus modernism in just a second. Okay, business starts to boom. Remember, I said there's like a little bit of a lull after World War One, but it picks up pretty quickly, so that's awesome. So you don't have any the government isn't bringing down policies. So laissez-faire is being supported out the wazoo by the government. You got three Republican presidents come in. You have President Harding, President Coolidge, and President Hoover in the 20s, and they all support. You got it. They all support big business. Okay, all these industries, like the car industry. Yay for Henry Ford. Gotta love him, right? In his Nazi supporting self, but whatever. Okay. Granted, keep in mind, if you remember from a lecture a while back, that there's one group that a red flag will start waving. If the farmers fail, okay, then the red flag is waving, like the economy is going to suffer too. It's coming for sure. So during the 20s, the one group that is going to suffer is the farmers. So they did really well. The farmers did during the war. Like everybody else in Europe can't really grow stuff because everything is being blown the crap apart. And so they're providing for the whole world. Well, after the war ends, that demand is gone. Okay. And so your prices are going to drop, and they've gone in and bought like all these new machines, and it's great. Well, prices just drop even more. And so the farmers are going to hit the fan in the 20s and really be suffering. They can't pay back debt. They're overproducing, surplus. Oh, it's ugly. And this red flag is waving that the economy in the US is about to do the same thing. But for 10 years, you're going to have some cool stuff happening, okay? So let's talk about all this stuff. Yay. Look at those women progressing forward, all right? So the population is moving from the country even more, okay? Like industrialization is going to bring more people to the cities. Well, now there are even more industrial jobs, okay? You even have a large group of African Americans during the war. So you got all these men go off and fight in the war. It leaves all these industrial jobs open. So women are going to take these industrial jobs. African Americans are going to move from the South in hopes to get these industrial jobs. That is called the Great Migration. Please write that down. So, the Great Migration is all these African Americans moving to the North, big cities that have industry like New York, Chicago, Detroit. Okay. And granted, all these cities are going to start to be seen as immoral. All right. This is where you can do the scandalous things that you can't do in the rural areas. All right. Alcohol is going to be illegal. We'll talk about that more in a second. But of course, what do people love to do? They love to break the rules. So we'll see that happening too. This is going to be the Jazz Age, and normally the Roaring Twenties is called the Jazz Age. Jazz is going to be brought through the Great Migration to the North, and so you'll see all these clubs open up in the North in these big cities, and and all these African Americans from the South are going to bring their music to the North. So hooray! Some other cultural stuff is like people want to buy things. Okay, some cool appliances are going to come out. Later on, you'll see a vacuum cleaner come out. You'll see a dishwasher come out, some refrigerators. Um, I don't think I could live life without my refrigerator. Okay, so that's pretty cool stuff. Now, this guy, super important, that moving assembly line. We've talked about him multiple times, but truly makes the car affordable for the regular man. So that's pretty awesome. Louis Armstrong has the best smile ever. He is one cool dude, okay? So he is a heck of a trumpeter, okay, and can really entertain the masses. But what he really does, he plays at a club in Harlem called the Cotton Club. Harlem is an African American neighborhood outside of New York, and he plays at this club. And what he does is he is going to attract people of all races, all creeds, all genders, all socioeconomic statuses to this club. And what he does at the Cotton Club is he integrates life at the Cotton Club. Like, that's how good he is, okay? He's able to cross cultural, racial boundaries. It's amazing. Like, he is one cool dude, and more than likely, y'all have heard his name before. That's how big of a deal he is. Duke Ellington, the Duke, okay, this awesome pianist is fantastic as well, pretty much participating in the same stuff as old Louis here, okay? So Babe Ruth, it's interesting. More than likely, all of y'all know who this person is. People, because of industry, okay, because stuff is able to get done so much quicker, people have more time on their hands. They have more money in their pockets in the 20s. And so they want to spend that on doing fun stuff, like whether it's getting out there and going bowling, going golfing, going to the park. Well, also, they're going to spend it on professional sports. So professional sports start to become a big deal. And Babe Ruth is a pretty cool guy. The Babe, all right, the great Bambino. I mean, what guy can actually point to the outfield and hit a home run? So pretty tough guy. Okay, pretty scandalous guy as well. but we can save that for a later date. All right, Charles Lindbergh is a pretty cool guy too. He's a little bit more crazy than Babe Ruth, but anyway, so he is going to be the first person to take a solo flight across the Atlantic. So he is going to take his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. They are going to strip it of everything to make sure that it can be full of as much gasoline to get him from New York City all the way to Paris, France. And so they strip it so much that he only has a wicker chair that he is flying in. He's really not protected by anything. I'm guessing y'all probably seen Iron Man, you know, like when he flies too high, it gets really cold and the ice forms. And as Lucky Lindy is taking his flight, he's going to suffer hypothermia. It takes him over 40 hours to get there. And so, of course, sleep deprivation. But he finally lands in Paris and is welcomed by a ticker tape parade. He has some weird stuff happen, like his daughter is kidnapped for a ransom. She's killed in the meantime. It's pretty awful. She was young too, like 1 or 2, I can't remember. But also, later on, he has some Nazi sympathies. So, there's that. Okay. Amelia Earhart has always interested me. I'm like, what the crap happened? So she is the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. So that's freaking amazing. Yay for feminism building during this time period. And she's a huge advocate for women's rights during this time. But also, she is going to go try to go around the world, and she will disappear. You know, maybe Bermuda Triangle, something. You know, everybody's claiming, "Oh, we found her body. We found this, whatever." Where is she? Man, really interesting. Okay. Charlie Chaplin is an English film star, and so the only films they had in the 20s, well, at first, are silent films. And so Charlie Chaplin had this character that you see on the right, and he would dress up and, you know, really funny, like walking around and doing all sorts of silly stuff. Can you guess what world leader will absolutely love him? That's right, Hitler loves him. It's why Hitler has the little mustache that he does. It's based off Charlie Chaplin. Chaplin will find that appalling and make a satirical movie about him called The Great Dictator in 1940, making fun of Adolf Hitler. Anyway, just really interesting. Uh, Yay for Charlie Chaplin. Okay. The Lost Generation is a set of American authors that are going to become really disillusioned with how materialistic the that America is getting during the 20s, just buying and buying and buying. And F. Scott Fitzgerald represents this. You have a couple other authors as well. They're going to leave America. And Ernest Hemingway is one of these. They're going to leave America. They're going to go live in Europe for a while. You'll probably read The Great Gatsby in 11th grade if you haven't read it already. Fantastic novel. Um, but uh, but anyway, they just really are upset with America. Plus, that lost generation also represents the massive amount of people that are truly lost during the Great War. Okay, a prohibition is going to be widely supported. Interestingly enough, alcohol used to be consumed pretty much at every meal. Water wasn't super clean, and so they would drink beer. Okay, so you have all these immigrants coming over from Europe, and beer is what they're used to drinking, and it had a very low alcohol content. Well, after the Civil War, you're going to see alcohol start to have a much higher alcohol content. And people aren't really drinking beer as much as they are drinking liquor. And you start to see all these bars open up, all these saloons open up, and these men are coming back completely sloshed because a saloon was not a place for a woman. Okay. And so you start to see this whole group believe that crime, that child abuse, that wife abuse is linked to the heavy liquor that was being consumed um, all across the nation. Okay. And so you're going to start to see some groups pop up. The Women's Christian Temperance Union. Hey, temperance is wanting prohibition. And both of those mean that they want to get rid of the alcohol. All right. And so, like this picture, this anti saloon league picture, I think it's super funny. Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. I think it's by the lady in the pink dress. I'm like, I don't know, she's not that attractive. I don't know. Anyway, but because alcohol also becomes connected to the massive amounts of immigration, especially from places like Germany, um, that had such a tradition of alcohol. The 18th Amendment is going to be passed. And so alcohol is going to be outlawed. Like this is just a propaganda poster um, supporting prohibition. Okay. And so it's just really interesting that it passes. But of course, people love to do interesting things. They love to sneak it in. So you start to see all these fake bars open up. You'd walk through a library. If you knew the secret password or the handshake, you could get into the bar that was behind the library. Or people are bringing in the alcohol for the speakeasy. So they're smuggling it in from Canada and Cuba. And so they're called bootleggers because at first they brought the alcohol in their bootlegs. Hey, what sport is going to start because of bootlegging? NASCAR. Yeah, you gotta have to have the quickest car to be able to get your stuff across the border. The most infamous, notorious bootlegger is Al Capone. And so he is going to be bootlegging and bootlegging and bootlegging. He is going to have his gang, this organized crime with these, Tommy guns and all sorts of stuff. He's killing off his competition. Like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre is pretty interesting to look up if you want to look that up. But he'll be finally convicted. A group is started in America because of him. They are just searching and searching and searching ways to convict him, to catch him bootlegging. This group is called the FBI. They finally get him on tax evasion charges. He spends some time in jail. They finally release him from jail because, he ends up having syphilis. Not great, okay? Not what we're going for. Syphilis is an STD. It attacks your brain, and it pretty much sends you back to elementary school. It makes you lose your mind for sure. So he dies alone in his home in Florida, not surrounded by his gang, and he is absolutely insane. So there's that. Okay, don't do drugs, guys. The radio becomes the center of family life. Here's the deal, like what the TV is for us today, what the internet is for us today, that's what the radio was for the people of the 20s, okay? So you could have the New York Yankees playing a baseball game, and they're going to beat, whoever, all right? And you could know the results of that game in California. and then the president could get on the radio and give a speech. And wherever you live in Boston, you live in Portland, then you are able to hear that, and that national culture comes in. That's a big deal. Okay, leads to a lot of nationalism. We think we're one country. We're not just a bunch of separate different places. Okay, women. Ooh, look at her dress. It is like almost above her knees. Okay, scandalous. And here's the deal. It's not like women are completely changing. You still have a whole slew of women staying at home, but then you also have women that are trying to break the conformity. Okay, these women are called flappers during this time. They're cutting their hair shorter, the short dresses. They're drinking. They're smoking. They're acting like men. It's not like they're acting like men, but they want to be treated as equals. Okay, really busting that traditional conformity. Another cultural item of the 20s is the Harlem Renaissance. So, for a long time in America, you have discrimination, you have racism, um, but the Harlem Renaissance is going to be this really big push to celebrate African American culture. It's going to come after the Great Migration. And so you're going to have people like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, who's a singer, okay? They're going to write about how awesome it is to be an African American in America, to celebrate that culture, the differences. You probably heard of Langston Hughes, okay? Um, his poem Dreams is one of the most iconic of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay. All right, we're going to pause right there and I'll talk about the Great Depression next.